Okay, my name is Lars Burgess. I'm a director of engineering for the RhoMobile suite server products that includes RhoConnect, or you might have heard of our hosted service, RhoHub. And then later this year we'll be formally launching RhoGallery. Just a kind of a quick show of hands, how many people here got to see Adam's talk yesterday on RhoConnect? Okay, great. So I'll kind of go quickly over the RhoConnect introduction, since most of you saw that. So what is RhoConnect? RhoConnect is we call it a mobile app integration server. It lets you interact with your back-end data systems, whether they're CRM or field service or really any kind of back-end system, and lets you synchronize your mobile application with that system in a very efficient way. So RhoConnect has several different clients that we support. The most popular ones are the client that comes built into Roads and RhoElements. So if you use Roads or RhoElements as you've going through your sessions here, you'll notice that we talk a lot about the Sync client or the RhoConnect client. It's built into the Roads framework. We also have a client for just regular Android Java if you're building a regular Android application, or if you have an existing iOS application, we have a Objective-C client. We also have a JavaScript client, RhoConnect.js, which I'll be showing later here in the demo. This lets you use RhoConnect just directly from an HTML5 application, for example, PhoneGap, or even a desktop application. So how does RhoConnect kind of work? What it does is you write these pieces of code called source adapters, which Adam talked a lot about yesterday, where you transform your backend data into simple data structures that can be synchronized. And the way that you transform that data in a source adapter, it's a pretty generic system. So what we do here with server plugins is we build upon that concept. And you can see here we support some pre-built adapters for systems like Sugar CRM, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, Salesforce, or you could, of course, build your own source adapters. And then for server plugins, we currently support Microsoft.NET MVC, Ruby on Rails, which will be what I'm showing today, and Spring MVC for Java. So adapters are pretty simple. I mean, you saw in the demo yesterday, it's usually not a lot of code. The power and expressiveness of Ruby lets you do a lot of things with very terse code, very easy to understand and read. So here's a typical source adapter query method. And here I've just baked in some hard-coded data. I've got a result hash. RhoConnect source adapters have to transform data into what we call a nested hash structure, or hash of hashes. In this case, I'm creating a hash that has two objects with an ID of 1 and ID of 2. And everything there's a name and an industry attribute for each one. So what does RhoConnect do with this? How does RhoConnect take this and synchronize it? Well, what it does with your data is pretty simple. It takes this and it serializes it to Redis in an efficient format using Redis sets. And we do that for a number of reasons. The most important reason is Redis supports atomic diffing on sets. And so what this lets us do is efficiently tell how much data has the device currently synchronized and how much data is left and what are the deltas. And we can do that in sub 50 millisecond time or sub 10 millisecond time. So you have to, of course, in your source adapter also write create, update, and delete methods. They follow a similar pattern where you're taking data that's coming in from the client and you're transforming it into a hash structure that RhoConnect understands, and then it saves it to Redis to keep track of what the client is doing. So why plugins? Well, plugins are simpler. Why are plugins simpler? So if we look at this example, we have a pretty straightforward structure here. It's just string object IDs and string attributes in a nested hash of each object. So we always know that this structure is going to be there for us. We know what this always looks like. So RhoConnect also has an HTTP API. And the way that this works is your application can make a HTTP call to this push objects method. RhoConnect will then update the associating Redis data for an adapter. and the client will get that latest data when it synchronizes. So you don't technically have to write an adapter to put data into RhoConnect. You can just do it over an HTTP API, and it will basically have the same effect. So here's an example using this API to push some data into the same source adapter example that I had before. In this case, I'm pushing a single object with an ID of 5, and the name is iPhone. And this is using Ruby, so it's using the popular HTTP client, REST client for doing that. So RhoConnect plugins build upon this concept. The idea is you should never have to write a source adapter for your application. You can just focus on writing your application, whether it's .NET or whether it's Spring MVC or if it's Ruby on Rails. So you just focus on writing your web application. The plugin takes care of interacting with RhoConnect and keeping track of the data that gets synchronized. So as I said, we currently support for Ruby, we support Rails or Sinatra applications using Active Record or Data Mapper as the ORMs. At kind of a lower level, the RhoConnect Ruby library it sits on top of your model, so it understands how to talk to Data Mapper or Active Record models. And then we support .NET MVC, as I mentioned, and Java Spring MVC. Now that being said, there's always going to be cases where you need to customize things, so it provides hooks where you can do something like convert a date format to an epoch time before you synchronize it. Let's say you want to send down just the integer time to the device. You can do that with hooks. And these are all the available hooks you have. You have an authenticate hook, which will receive the device's username and password and lets you authenticate the user in your backend system. RhoConnect doesn't, your RhoConnect server doesn't know anything about authentication at this point. It's just forwarding on the credentials to your web application. And then you get create, query, update, and delete hooks as well. So you could effectively write a source adapter inside of your model if you wanted to, just like adapters. And then for those of you who use Heroku, I'm going to attempt to show a live demo. Hopefully the internet is working. Of using our Heroku add-on. It's a simple way to, if you have an existing Rails or Sinatra application on Heroku, you can install this add-on and everything is auto-configured for you. And all you have to do is set up your models to sync and it'll automatically happen. So I encourage anyone here who's using Heroku to check this out. Even if you're not using Heroku and you're interested, it's very simple to get set up and start playing with it. So what is RhoConnect RB? This is the Ruby server plugin for RhoConnect. Again, you're focusing on your model, whether it's Active Record or Data Mapper, all of the logic around how data gets synchronized, what data gets synchronized, that's all going in your model. And RhoConnect has this concept of partitions. I'm not sure if Adam mentioned it yesterday, where the way that we tell, okay, this particular data set is associated with this user is by a partition, or in the Rails world they call it a scope. And this is basically just a way to key the data for this user. So let's say, for example, I had a list of calendar events for Lars. I could log into the system with the username Lars, and all my data would be stored inside of RhoConnect under the Lars keyword. So when you query for this data, you query it by a partition. The partition is always going to be passed on to you, so you know from where this request for data is coming from, and you can build up your result set. So getting started, if you're using Ruby on Rails, the canonical way to add a gem is to put it into your gem file. So we just add this one line into our gem file, and we run bundle. That will automatically add the library to our Rails application. Just kind of show by hands, who here has used Rails before or done development with Rails or Sinatra? Anyone here? Okay, so we have a few. So just kind of you've heard a lot about Roads, obviously, and the Row Elements framework. Roads was kind of initially inspired by Ruby on Rails. It takes a lot of the same development patterns and design structure as Ruby on Rails. So I'd highly recommend if you have some time to check out Rails to play around with it. It's a pretty amazing framework for building web apps. So the next thing I do here to set things up is I run in my Rails app rake RhoConnect setup. What this will do is it'll install an initializer file where I can configure the plugin. And this is the only thing I have to do to actually set up the plugin. So this is the initializer it generates. There's a few key things I need to add here. Since RhoConnect is a bidirectional system, RhoConnect needs to know where your application is hosted so it can talk to it. And the reverse is true. Your application obviously needs to know where RhoConnect is hosted. So I'm going to set those things up here. I'm going to set my app endpoint. In this case, the Rails application is going to be running on localhost 3000. Actually, I'm not going to set the location of the RhoConnect instance here because I'm going to show that in the demo using an environment variable, which is something that's sort of key for making your application a little bit more portable. And then the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in my authenticate hook. So what RhoConnect will do here is it will send the credentials to my application in the form of this credentials hash. And you'll get a login and a password in that hash. So I can use these credentials to authenticate the user and then return true or false. So in this case, I already have a user model that has an authenticate method, which is sort of a common paradigm in Rails. And this method will return true or false based on the credentials that are passed in. And it compares them with a hashed password in the database. So the next thing that you need to do is set up your model. In this case, I'm using an active record model. That's the default model type for Rails. And I'm going to be building an event model here. So it's going to just show like a list of events, for example, the app form here. And this model is very simple. It's just, it belongs to a user. So I'm going to be logged in the system, and I'll have a list of my events that I'm tracking. And the web application will show me my events. First thing I do is I include RhoConnect resource. So what this does is this uses a powerful feature of Ruby called module mixins. And it will basically add all of the functions that we provide in the Rails server plugin directly into your model. So your class now, this event class, now has a bunch of methods defined that come with RhoConnect that we don't have to worry about implementing, that handle automatic transfer of data between our Rails application and the RhoConnect server. Next is I'm going to define a partition. So this partition is a way to get that key of data. Remember I was talking about everything in RhoConnect is keyed off of a unique string. And the most canonical way to do it is to have the unique string match the username. So if I log into the system with the username Lars, I need to have some way to find that user from my event model. And I'm doing that here by using an active record relationship, which is this belongs to user. So what this is going to tell me is this relationship to the user for this particular event is going to be used to synchronize the data. And then the final piece is I need to define my data set that's going to be used for a query. And again, it's using this partition. So what happens is when the device will synchronize, it'll tell my application, hey, I'm Lars, where's my data? And the RhoConnect server plugin will execute this method, passing in Lars as the key. So I can do a simple active record query here that will give me all of the data associated for the Lars user. And again, don't worry too much about this Rails or this active record syntax. This is just an example. If you're using Java, Spring MVC, you can use the conventions there for querying down data. So again, my partition defines the scope, and my RhoConnect query method defines the data set. So this is just a quick overview of how the Heroku add-on works. So one of the things I haven't covered yet as well, if I'm running my Rails application, I still need to run a RhoConnect server. And what the Heroku add-on does is it helps you eliminate that need. You can just install the add-on. That way you don't have to worry about hosting your own RhoConnect instance. And these RhoConnect instances, they're literally just, and I'll show this in the demo, it's just a vanilla RhoConnect app that I've generated. I didn't change any code in it. I just generated an empty app, and then I start it up. We do have plans in the future to make that a little bit more simple, where you can literally just start a command from the command line, or just run a single command, and you'll have a RhoConnect server running that can talk to these server plugins. So what I'll do here is I'm going to add the Heroku add-on. And you'll see some output like this, where it adds it to my application. And then Heroku has a nice feature where you can view the configuration. So everything that runs in Heroku is done with environment variables. And in this case, provisioning a RhoConnect instance using our service, it takes usually about 20 to 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. So in order to tell when it's finished, since Heroku doesn't have a way to wait for it to finish, you can run this command to check the environment variables. And so eventually, after about 30 seconds or so, you'll see this RhoConnect URL appear. And this way you know that your RhoConnect instance is ready and it's wired up to your Rails application. And then for the changes to take effect, I go ahead and restart my app. And it's ready to go. So hopefully the internet's working well, and I'll try to jump to a demo here. Okay. So what I've got here is my Ruby on Rails application. Can everyone see that? Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, I've got this initializer. So I've already run the rate command to install the initializer into my application. So the first thing I need to do is I want to add this line here. So what this is going to do is it's going to tell my local RhoConnect instance to talk to the Rails application running on this host and port. And then I'm just going to have this authenticate method. In this example, I don't have a user model, so I'm just going to always return true, so it doesn't matter who I log in as. And then next, I'm going to go to my model. I have an event model here that I've generated. So the first thing I do is I add RhoConnect resource to it. This is going to, as we talked about earlier, it's going to install all those methods into my event model class to handle automatic synchronization. And then I'm going to define the partition. I'll just hardcode the username here since I don't have a user. And then I'm going to add a query. In this case, I just want to get all of the events. Active Record has a simple way to do that, just calling .all. And so what I'm going to demonstrate now is running the RhoConnect application locally and using it with a server plugin. As I mentioned, if I'm using the Heroku add-on, I don't have to do this, but just for the purposes of demonstration, I can run this application. Now, an important thing here is the way that RhoConnect plugins talk to the RhoConnect instance is using this HTTP API, and they need to provide a token. This token is sort of like if you're using other popular developer APIs that have tokens, you have to provide this token with each HTTP request, so RhoConnect knows that this is a secure request and it can handle the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this RhoConnect application specifying just a junk token here, and then I'm going to use that token in my Rails application. So now it's started up. So some of you, especially those of you who watched Adam's presentation, was using RhoStudio to start things, and this is showing an example of how to start the application from the command line. You'll see this output here. I can always, if I want to, return to my console, I can press Control / and it detaches it. It's still running in the background, or I can reattach to it, and it'll just bring it back up. So now I'm inside of my Rails application. starting a Rails application is pretty simple. They have this, this Rails S command. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to specify an environment variable that defines how to connect to my RhoConnect instance. And this is sort of a kind of a principle here of having a similar environment that I'm running on my local machine to Heroku. Heroku likes to call it dev prod parity. But essentially, it's the way that I run the application locally should match as closely as possible as my production environment. And in this case, when I specify this environment variable, it's going to match exactly how Heroku is going to run it. Oops. So I forgot to run bundle here. Okay, so you'll see here now my Rails application is started up. And I can go ahead and navigate to it here on my machine. And so here I've just got a simple Rails application. It has this events model. And I've got one entry here for my event. I can go and see here it's got a start time, an end time, a price, a description, and a title. So it's a very simple model. Now I want to synchronize this data with my mobile application. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I've got a roads application already. Many of you have seen the intros here on building row elements and roads applications, so I won't cover that. But what I've got is a roads application that has also an event model with sync enabled. So this is all I need to do on my road side to set up the model for synchronization. And I've generated the model with the same attributes. So it's got a title, description, start time, end time, and price. So when I connect to this RhoConnect instance, I'll be able to see the data properly. And then the only other thing I need to do is I need to point this roads application at my local sync server. So I do that by editing the runtime configuration file, rhoconfig.txt, and I set the sync server property. So now that that's all set up, I'm going to go ahead and run my roads application. And again, I'm using the command line interface here just so I stay kind of in the same window. You could also build this obviously through RhoStudio. So here's my basic event application. I haven't changed any of the default code here. I'm just going to go ahead and log in. And I'll log in as the user Lars. Password. There we go, and log in. So you can see it was real fast because I was running it locally. But I've got my data synchronized here. And so the great thing about this is, that's a little bit different from source adapters, is when I change data in my Rails application, it's going to automatically update the RhoConnect server. So this is a little bit different from source adapters where you need to run these source adapters on some kind of interval. The default interval is usually every 5 minutes. But what this lets me do is have a more efficient communication mechanism with my RhoConnect server. I can edit data, delete data, update or create new data, and it will automatically update the RhoConnect instance, again, for that given user. That's a very important concept here. It's not going to just update everything all the time. It's going to update data for a given user. So I can go ahead here and let's see, $30 is kind of cheap. Why don't we change it to $99? Okay. And all I have to do, if I go here, I don't want to wait the 5 minutes for this to check the server. I'll go ahead and synchronize it. You see it automatically updated it. So I didn't have to write any source adapter code. I didn't have to write any code in my model even to facilitate updating updating it. This all came from the server plugin. So next what I'm going to show is taking this application and installing the Heroku add-on, so you can see how to quickly get a RhoConnect instance spinning up in the cloud, and that way you can test it, from your devices or with your team. So it's real simple. I'll just go ahead. I've already got this application added to Heroku. And it's this application called Stormy Lightning. And you can see I've already got the RhoConnect add-on here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that so I can show adding it. Oops, Heroku. These are kind of some funny names that they generate. So this is going to remove the add-on, and then I'm going to show here installing an add-on again to this application. Takes a few seconds. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and just add it. And again, I'm going to run this config command that I was showing earlier, which will show me that the environment is up and running. Sometimes it takes a few seconds. Okay, so you can see here now when I run it, I've got this RhoConnect URL. This is my new RhoConnect instance that was provisioned automatically by our Heroku add-on. And now when I restart my application, what it's going to do is it's going to tell this RhoConnect instance about itself. It's going to send that app endpoint, and then it's going to be ready for using as a plugin. So I'll go ahead and restart. Great. And then a useful tool I use is the Heroku logs command, and they have an option to tail. So I can just leave this running, and this will show me if there's any problems with my Ruby on Rails application. It'll show up here in the output. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to my Stormy Lightning server, which I've got running here. It's the same application, it's just running on Heroku. You can see here it's got this URL, herokuapp.com. I've got some data. So here you can see I've got this event. It's got a different price and a different description. So I'm going to go ahead and now synchronize with this instance. So you remember from the output here when I ran Heroku config, there was this URL. This URL is important because I need to use this particular URL to synchronize with it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my web console and grab that URL. You can see what we have here is the RhoConnect console, but it's embedded inside of Heroku's add-on interface. So I'm already logged in because I'm logged into Heroku. And I just go here to the backend app URL, and I copy this link. So now I'm going to go here and update my configuration. I don't want to synchronize with localhost anymore. I want to synchronize with the server running on Heroku. And that's all I have to do there. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and reset this simulator. and then start this up again. And so this example, I'm using the Rhodes RhoConnect client. So you get in with every Rhodes and Elements application, you get a built-in RhoConnect client. The nice thing about that is you don't have to worry about setting up all the other pieces. You can just enable sync in your model, and it's automatically done for you. So here I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to use the same user. You can see I've got the different data now. Why don't I go ahead and try to show both the windows here. Hopefully we can see that okay. So this is my Heroku application, and this is my mobile application here. So I can go ahead, let's say I want to change the price on the device here. I know it's not 300 anymore. Let's say it's 200. Last day, they give us a discount. So now, when I go ahead and synchronize this, it's going to go the other direction. It's going to send the data from the device up to the RhoConnect instance, and the RhoConnect instance is going to talk to the plugin behind the scenes and update my active record model. And so I can go ahead and refresh. And you can see now the price is updated here. So I can make changes both directions. I could delete this or create a new record, and I would see them reflected on both the web application and my mobile app. So this is a pretty basic application, obviously. I didn't show something that has, typically a business application will have 30, 50, 100 models and lots of complex relationships. And so it's kind of, this example is a little bit contrived in that sense. It's pretty basic. So how would RhoConnect work in a real application? Something that's got a lot of data, it's got a lot of different models. It turns out it's pretty much the same. You wind up not having to write too much code. So what I'm going to show here is we have this popular open source Rails application called Fat-Free CRM. You can find it on the web. It's got lots of installation examples. So what I have here is I have this application running on Heroku also, and I've got it set up with the RhoConnect add-on. This application, it's got lots of different business objects. It's got leads, campaigns, accounts. You can see there's definitely a non-trivial amount of data and business logic going on here. And the models themselves, let me go ahead and open that up here. So the models themselves just have the same pattern. I add my RhoConnect. Let's take, for example, lead. I'll add my RhoConnect resource here. I'll define my partition. In this case, I do have a user model, so I can reference that relationship. And you can see this is all stuff that comes with Fat-Free CRM. It's a pretty complex business object. But then at the bottom here, I've just added my RhoConnect query. So first I grab the user where the partition matches, and then I use the active record where method to return a list of leads that match the user ID. And that's actually the only thing I've done here. I didn't customize the create or update or anything. It's all done for me automatically. So to demonstrate this, synchronizing with this, I'm going to use the RhoConnect JS client. So we support, as I mentioned earlier, RhoConnect from multiple environments, Android, iOS. If you already have an existing iPhone or iPad application, you can still use RhoConnect. And we also have JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Xcode here. I've got a PhoneGap application for Fat-Free CRM. And this PhoneGap application is using RhoConnect JS. So this is for those of you not familiar with PhoneGap, it's a framework that has a similar idea to RhoElements, where it uses a web view for the view part, and everything is done with HTML. Except PhoneGap takes it a step further, and everything is just HTML. They just have an HTML5 layer. So what I've done here is I've configured RhoConnect.js to talk to this instance that was provisioned by the Heroku add-on. And then I just set some other options here. All of this information is in our documentation. And so if I go ahead and run this, you can see it's using jQuery Mobile with PhoneGap. I'm going to go ahead and log in as a test user. They have a test user, Aaron. Password is Aaron. And what this is doing is it's going and synchronizing with that RhoConnect instance tied to my Fat-Free CRM. And when it's done, it pops up a message. So I can go ahead and look here. If I'm logged in as Aaron and I want to see my list of leads, I can see those leads here. So this is using some different features of jQuery Mobile, like a pop-up toolbar here. So let's say I want to edit one of these. Let's see, I didn't quite get Jacqueline's email correct. It's actually Jacqueline H. So I'll go ahead and update that. And the sync button is on this list, so I have to push sync from here. And it tells me it's successful. So now I can just refresh this page, and I'll see here on the left, recently updated items was Jacqueline, and her email address was updated to Jacqueline H. So you can see it works. The code I had to put in was very minimal. I'm just staying inside of my Rails application. I don't have to learn any new paradigms. I can just write some more methods in my active record model, and I get synchronization. So I just wanted to mention here at the end, we have our documentation site. If you go to docs.rhomobile.com, and if you kind of scroll down under the RhoConnect section, we have, I recommend, if you haven't gone through it already, go through the Getting Started. It explains the concepts between source adapters and plugins, and then the plugin introduction is there underneath the source adapter section. So you can learn about the Rails plugin and the .NET and the Java. And just more information there. The Heroku add-on, you can check it out. Also, please follow RhoMobile at Twitter if you aren't already. We do lots of announcements for new features, new releases of these different plugins. And thank you.